Hi, this is Dr. Gayle MacBride, and I just wanted to thank you for getting all the way to the end of season 2. I hope you've enjoyed this season with all of our guests. We are busy working on season 3, so I want you to watch out for it to drop in early 2026. In the meantime, enjoy a mix of rerun episodes that have been curated for you by our intrepid host, Michael MacBride. These rerun episodes are a mix of the most listened to, the least listened to, and all of our guests. We're going to give them a repeat performance as well. So thank you for following along with us on this journey. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. This helps us get more listeners. And please, even though we are on a break, we are watching our mailbag. So thanks for listening and look forward to season 3 in 2026.
Well, hey there. You've stumbled upon the intersection of internet quandaries and psychological insight. Welcome to Veritas Views on AITA, where the quirks of the internet meet the expertise of Veritas Psychology Partners.
Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Michael MacBride, and I'm joined by our dynamic trio of psychologists today.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gayle MacBride, and with me, as always, is Dan Kessler, my business partner and psychologist. And our very special addition is Dr. Lauren Fogel-Mercy. She is a licensed psychologist who is ASECT certified, which means she's a sex therapist, and she is certified in emotionally focused couples therapy. But Lauren, we are so excited to have you here. A little bit of fangirl. She is also the co-author of one of those amazing books called Desire, an inclusive guide to navigating libido differences in relationships. Welcome, Lauren.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Excited to have you.
Yeah, this is really, and I was telling Lauren before we began recording, she was like, "Oh, your book is behind me." I'm like, "Yeah, because I use it a lot with the couples I'm working with." So, and as I mentioned, before, not because like you're a colleague, but because it's just a really good text on the topic, or I didn't say text. It's a good book on the topic.
It's a good book.
Text makes it sound like it's hard to read.
It's not. I read it, and I told Lauren at one point, I heard her voice, like it has her cadence and her flavor. Yeah. I don't know how you did that, because you have a writing partner here who is a contributor, and you guys work so well together to create this familiar, just kind of comforting voice throughout the book. So it's not a text, it is a read, but it certainly filled a hole out there in the literature for people who don't understand desire and discrepancies and how to be inclusive about that and be supportive in your relationship. So it's an awesome book. Enough plugging.
Thank you so much. No, appreciate that so much. And it's funny because you'll say, it has my voice, and others say it has Jennifer's voice. So I think it's kind of a blend, which is what we
don't know Jennifer very well. So we know your voice.
I know. Yeah. Depending on who you can sort of hear us, hopefully in the topic and in the writing.
Yeah, no, it definitely comes through. It has a warmth to it. So I appreciate you writing it and you guys working on that. So we should talk about.
Yeah, and I'm so happy that you're joining us here to figure out who's the asshole. So, Michael, do you have a question or a prompt for the three of us today?
I do, and I always try to find something that I think will strike either of you as interesting or cause some kind of interesting conversation. It was an interesting challenge to find one for three of you. But I think I found one will do the trick. But for any of the newbies out there who don't know what this is, Am I the Asshole is simply a method of putting a scenario out into the world and saying a reality check of like, hey, who is the asshole here? And was that me? Sometimes it is. So when there's been any kind of identifiable information, we usually try to make it a little more discreet. And you should also know, if you're new, stick around through the credits. We always have some kind of bonus conversation. But so far, Lauren, Gayle, Dan know nothing about what I'm going to throw their way. So let's roll. This is what we got today. The topic is, am I the asshole for putting the kibosh on my son's naked vacation?
What?
Wait, what?
and there's more.
I'm just going to go with yes right away. I mean, I don't want to judge a book by its cover, but
I'm sort of hoping this one is like 3.
I would think that this is an adult son.
Probably an adult, but
I would think this is an adult son.
So this
all right,
is
Michael,
a
please
case
tell us the rest of the story, please.
Sure. And this is the case where the apostrophe actually comes after the S, so there's 2 sons involved. But I'll read the post here. So this is what we got. And there's a little bit of a setup, but stick with me. I think it's all worthwhile. So, I'm a very proud father of two boys, 18 and 19, who will be completing their freshman and sophomore years in college in the spring. They're doing great in school, excellent grades despite both being on athletic teams and lots of extracurriculars. As a reward for them doing so well, I've told them I would pay for a vacation during spring break in a few months, anywhere they'd like to go within reason. Now, this becomes a sticking point later on. The internet wants to know what that conversation looked like and exactly how clear he was
What is
with
within
the
reason?
within reason.
Within
I
reason,
don't know.
yeah.
He doesn't clarify that, unfortunately. But okay, so then the boys wanted to go to an all-inclusive resort in Jamaica. Apparently, a whole bunch of their friends from school had the same idea, and they're doing a big, fun group trip. I love Jamaica, been several times myself, but I started overhearing details that gave me pause. The resort they want to go to is literally called hedonism. It has everything you'd want in a resort as far as activities and such, but the whole place is clothing optional. And some of the places, like one of the beaches and a couple pools, actually are required to be nude. And they have things like playrooms and happening huts, and one can only imagine what goes on there. There are theme nights like naughty nurses and fetish leather and lingerie. I gave a hard nope to that. I want to reward them, but I'm not going to fund what sounds like nothing short of an orgy. They are not impressed with my decision, not in the least. So, am I the asshole for backing out of funding their vacation that I promised?
Wow. This is nuanced. I've got so many. I've got a yes and a no in my head.
Yeah. I can certainly. I mean, I don't want to ever choose to place my ethics over someone else's ethics. That's, at the same time, it's my money, and I can choose what to do with my money. So I'm not necessarily. I don't know the right.
It's a bit of a struggle. Lauren, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, Lauren, what? I saw some, we're on Zoom here if you're listening in a non-video format. We saw some I saw some. Lauren, what's behind the looks?
I think this is like so many ethical dilemmas. So when you go to school to become a psychologist, you do a lot of ethical debates, and you get thrown, situations and scenarios much like this one, right? Where it's like, there's nuance, there's maybe not a clear answer. You could maybe argue several different points. And I think that that's true, at least for me. I find that in clinical practice, things are not always so black and white. And so it makes so much sense that this is challenging. And to your point, Dan, we're not going to tell somebody what their values should be or what is okay for them to spend their own money on.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I can see definitely both sides to this, right? One is these are young people who, being thrust into a very highly sexualized scenario might be challenging for them to navigate as very young people.
Mm-hmm.
You said that so well.
Oh my gosh, we're so impressed.
I like that. Being thrust into this difficulty navigating a highly sexualized atmosphere. That's well stated.
Like she's a sex therapist or something.
18, 19 years old, that's a lot to sort of figure out. And you may not sort of know how to do that very well at that age. And there may be a lot of impulsivity that can come up in a scenario like that.
18-year-old young men, impulsive, the hell you say.
Right.
But I just getting into some of the nitty gritty here, the typical age range at a resort like hedonism is not 18, 19. Is my understanding.
I would assume that it's a bit older.
Okay.
Yeah. I would also assume, because a lot of 18 and 19-year-olds can't afford that for themselves, right? So This is a scenario where a parent is footing the bill. So yeah, they might be, an anomaly or outlier in terms of age range.
I think they, go ahead.
I mean, do you think that dad is not just maybe judging the scenario, but also feeling maybe a bit protective. I mean, if I were a parent and I understood even principles around enthusiastic consent, like do these 18 and 19-year-olds have enough skills to sort of navigate that? Now we're bringing in this idea of some older individuals who, maybe can't afford this kind of resort for themselves, but whether or not these teenagers can really do what they need to do and wrap themselves around that in a kind of higher pressure environment. We're on vacation, we're with friends, we're supposed to be doing all of these wild things. Like there can be some implicit sort of pressure or coercion that could happen here, and they maybe are a bit at risk.
Yeah, this sort of, oh, go ahead, Lauren, you had a thought.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a sense of protectiveness that I would assume is inherent in this dilemma, right? That you're the parent. And if you fund the trip knowing what they're going to be doing, that may be, giving the impression that you condone or consent to what they might be doing. And you don't know for certain, all that's going to be involved in what they're doing. You have an idea maybe of what they're doing, but there may be consequences to some of the choices that they make that they may not be fully aware of. So the other thing that I think of, the other sort of side of the coin, is this is such an opportunity for conversation between parents and children, for conversations around consent and safe sex practices, and like giving thought to how they want to operate in these relational spaces and sexual spaces. And, what would it be like if you were to go to something like this? And what kind of choices would you want to be mindful of? And what would be, what are you going for? What are your goals? What do you want to be thoughtful of in terms of how to respect other people? I mean, there's just such an opportunity for really good sexual health and education conversation here.
Yeah, I'm imagining, like, if this is a group of people going, and that's what it sounds like, not just the brothers, but also some of their friends. Like, they're not all going to be in the same space, and I could totally see this pressure, this pressure to engage in practices you didn't feel comfortable with, they're giving consent to going, but the actual being in a place is sometimes quite a bit different than we imagine it's going to be. I'm also trying to imagine, like in my head, and full disclosure, I've never been to hedonism. But I just imagining. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. You never know where life will take you.
Okay.
You know what,
okay.
She is spot on.
You're right. Yet, I envision it being sort of a couples atmosphere, and I envision sort of couples that are not 18, 19, but couples that are somewhat older, 30, 40, 50 range, and I'm trying to imagine this like group of spring breaking 18-year-olds showing up at this resort. Like, I think they may envision this like one thing and find out that it's a whole bunch of older couples going, "Fuck are you doing here?"
Well,
like, I'm just totally projecting.
Staff have to deal with this, I'm sure, often, right? These kids showing up with this idea of hedonism, right? As opposed to keeping a safe and respectful environment for sexual activity and, and maybe exploring and playing and those kinds of things that are maybe not what that resort staff want to be doing, because 18 and 19-year-olds can be kind of difficult to manage. And then you put alcohol on board, because I'm assuming that this kind of resort has that kind of thing available. And boy, that's just that feels like a nightmare scenario, really.
Right. I'm not envisioning this as being like what they think it's going to be.
No, not at all.
I don't envision the resort being super stoked about them like showing up, and like, I haven't, but then I have no idea. I just like, I'm projecting a lot of my preconceived notions, having never been there.
So
Michael, you have to say.
I looked it up really quick because I was curious. The average age is 40 to 60. So.
Yeah, that tracks. Because you can afford it. So then we're back to this idea of within reason, right? Or that offers to pay for a vacation. This isn't the vacation he wanted for them, and has some reservations. and he wants to back out. He wants to say, okay, I don't want to pay for this. This is not what I had in mind. So we're really concerned, obviously, about the safety and the well-being of these boys going to this environment. But is dad an asshole for backing out? And, I think we kind of touched on it earlier, dad offered to pay for this, but at the end of the day, I do think it's dad's money. I have a parallel, but not nearly the scenario, is when, our children, we give them, or we have offered to buy things, at different times because they're children. And there have been times where it's like, yeah, no, I'm actually not buying another Lego set. Like, I can't even tell you how many pounds of Legos that exist in our home.
Well,
I don't need more. So no, I will buy you something, but I'm not buying that.
All right. So full disclosure, I have an 18-year-old to be 19 next year. And I won't get into my thoughts about what I would do if he was suggested this, but it's certainly an interesting thing to ponder as a parent.
As a parent, do you fund a trip to an expensive all-inclusive out of the country, regardless of nudity and sexual activity? Or is that just the no-go? Because it's really expensive. That's not what I meant when I was thinking about a trip, maybe backpacking through Spain, but kind of a little bit on the cheaper, or Portugal or something like that, as opposed to, gosh, I'm sending you to an all-inclusive resort, which I sort of imagine is maybe on the spendier side, right? Do we take that piece of it out? Or, right, because what we're trying to sort through is the confound of our judgments and concerns about that kind of resort from the expense.
Yeah. I think what would be so cool is, regardless of whether this parent chooses to support the plan or not, is to use this as an opportunity either way to have some conversations with these young boys, and to maybe even talk through the decision. If the decision is, I'm not comfortable with that, I would want to encourage that parent to maybe share a little bit more about the thinking behind that, right? Like, here's my concerns. Here's what I'm thinking about. Here's what I want for you. Here's what I don't want for you. Here's where I'm feeling protective of you. The other thing that I would be really mindful of is what kind of message is being sent around sexuality. So I think there's a way to both say, I'm not comfortable sending you on this trip, and that's not because sexuality is bad or wrong. That's not because exploring is, not being encouraged, but it may be because this is not the demographic place for you. This is a place that I think there's too much stimuli all at once, and it might be overload and overwhelming to you as a young person, and where I don't know that you're developmentally ready to make all of these decisions at once. And so I don't feel comfortable with that, which is different than, I want to shut down sexuality, I want to shut down exploration, and I want to send you a message that, sex is bad or wrong.
Yeah. One of the things that comes up a lot in this podcast, Lauren, is this idea that so many of the interpersonal conflicts we have are resolved with a good conversation. And so often it comes up, and I joke that almost every rom-com would be like spoiled by a good conversation 10 minutes into it, where everyone goes, oh yeah, and acts like a grown-up and makes a good decision, makes a better decision, and then, roll credits. And this is, I love your description there. This is a perfect opportunity to sit down and have that nuanced conversation. No, I'm not putting the kibosh or judging your sexuality, but I am making a choice about I am talking with you about my concerns around where you are developmentally and all that. I love that conversation, and I think that those of us who are parents who are listening have hopefully had these conversations with your kids that are like sitting down and recognizing the nuance in much of this.
And I know historically we have not done a really great job of creating open environments to have these conversations. And I think as a parent looking at least public school sex education, it's appallingly limited. So I really think that we have to do a better job by our children to have these open conversations, even if your kid is telling you, oh my gosh, mom, you're so cringe.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, where can they have those conversations?
Well,
which leads me actually to a question. Have either of you seen the show Heartstopper?
no.
No.
It is okay. It's a really interesting show. And Dan, your voice was in my head so much as I was watching this. It's
Sorry to hear that.
No. It's high school kids in the UK navigating relationships and attraction and sexual identity.
Right.
And at every turn, I expected this to be that typical sort of like rom-com. We didn't have the conversation formula. And they created the show almost maybe to the extreme other end, where these kids have like thoughtful conversations. And when they say, hey, I was kind of butthurt about this thing, like they don't sit on it and let it fester and then have like some sort of side off, like active storyline. They just come back and say, I was butthurt about the thing. And then partner goes, oh, how really interesting. Thanks for being vulnerable. Like it really is it was a well done show that I really enjoyed. So if you haven't seen it and you're interested in having these kinds of conversations, and I think maybe even helping raise, for these parents, I'm not sure how they raised emotionally mature children to have these kind of sexual conversations, because they were a little bit, in some cases, a bit repressed themselves. But I thought it was a good model, and I would love for children out there to be able to talk to each other. Well, children, I mean, they're like 16, 17, 18
children.
years old. Yeah, children. Not like children.
Right.
Having emotionally mature conversations about sexual activity and intimacy and consent. And I mean, even to the level of just, may I kiss you? Which was really, really great. So a little bit of a plug for the show, because it dovetails into a little bit of here what we're talking about in terms of youth and decision around sexual activity and what's okay and what's not okay.
So I've got a curious, Lauren. So the getting back to the original question here, would you be willing to render a verdict on Dad? Is he the asshole? If I put you on the spot here?
I don't think he's an asshole for setting a boundary based on his concerns. Mm-hmm. I think he has a right to do that because it is, like we said, his money. It's also his children, and he is the adult in the room, right? So I don't think that makes him an asshole. I think it is a nuanced conversation. Mm-hmm. And I think, I mean, what he's offering is very kind, right? And very considerate to say, hey, go on the trip. I do get to, sort of say yes and no to the final verdict of what you want to do. And I think there can be, some really good parenting opportunity in this. I think it would be, he would be remiss to just do, I think what old school parenting would do is just say no, and then that's the end of the conversation and we're done. But such an opportunity, like we're saying here, to sit down and actually talk through the decision, talk through the concerns, maybe even ask some questions of these young boys about, have you considered how would consent look? How would safe sex practices look? How would you deal with feeling any pressure or coercion from your peers, from what's going on around you? How would you stick to your values or your boundaries in an environment that maybe is pushing the limits? Such great opportunities for really active, thoughtful, intentional parenting. Yeah. So I don't think that's an asshole thing to say, hey, I'm not comfortable with this. And to just be really clear, it's not because I think this place is a bad place. It's not because I don't want you to explore. It's not because I'm trying to put, restraints on your sexuality. But I also think you're not in a place yet where you can handle that much happening all at once. Yeah. And I also don't think it's maybe the right place for you being 19 with a bunch of 40-year-olds.
Right. So first off, Lauren, you've totally convinced me that this is the correct answer. And on top of that, like, I want to say to these young men, like, you do realize that they're all going to be like, everyone there is going to be your mom and dad, your mom and I's age, right? Like that's what you're like, it's not like it's going to be all like old folks like us. Like,
they may not realize what they're actually signing up for.
They have this probably fantasy world in their head of what it's going to be like. And like, it's not going to be like that for them.
And I see this conversation that you've modeled, Lauren, which is so beautiful.
It's really nice. So
good. My 18, 19-year-old hat on, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not buying it, right? Dad, you just won't want me to go. Like, I think there could be some pushback, but ultimately, I think, Lauren, what you're saying is there are no assholes here. Because I also think it's normal at 18 and 19 to want to push for this kind of thing. I want to do what
Yeah.
my friends are
Yeah.
doing. This sounds really fun. I'm
Yeah.
I'm not happy that you are telling me no to this, because this dad has had a lifetime of telling his kids no, don't XYZ because it's dangerous, and they're going, yeah, but it sounds like fun. So
Yeah.
Right.
No.
I see the pushback here. I think the boys may still think dad's an asshole, but I think at the
Right.
end of the day, I think that we are in agreement. There are really no assholes here. Even if the kids push, the kids are
No.
pushing because kids push.
No.
They don't
no,
have to like that. That's
Yeah,
okay.
no, they absolutely don't have to. You're right.
No, this is one of those very rare situations where there just are no assholes here. I totally get the 18, 19-year-olds and the thoughts they have in their head and the lack of clarity around thoughts and understanding sexuality in this greater level. I totally get dads like, my money and I don't feel comfortable with this. Like, I get as you said, Gail, that I totally see the kids pushing back some and saying, but Dad, you said, and you know what? There are no assholes here. So, Michael, what did the internet say?
Well, the internet's always fun. I thoroughly enjoy their feedback because, sometimes they pile on and sometimes they go in predictable ways. And then this time, like, it took some interesting turns. So, for instance, several people hypothesized that this was a promotional post for hedonism.
Oh,
They're like, this is your only post. And he's like, it's a throwaway account. And like, there was like this whole argument about whether or not they were promoting a resort. And anyway, so that was kind of funny. Other people criticized him for the way he wrote his post. He used like bold and italics, and they're like, that's a dick move. And he's like, I just learned how to do this. And so like he weirdly like responded to those kind of things, but did not respond to other questions that people asked, which was, like, where's mom in the equation or other parent? Like, are you a single parent? Like, what's the situation? What's that conversation like? Why are they not involved? And he didn't respond to any of that. But for the most part, people came on the side of you're not the asshole. Like you guys said, it's your money. You know what's best for your children. Even though they are adults, you should definitely have a
adult-ish.
Yeah, I mean, they're right on that cusp.
18, like you're legally an adult when you're 18, but you've yet to develop the ability to really project yourself into the future and understand consequences of actions. So while you can buy a car and vote and do all of the adult things, the brain is not the adult brain until what is it, 23, 24, 25 in there?
I think in males
26?
especially. So these guys have 8
in
more
males
years of
maybe
brain development.
80. Yeah.
Yeah, 80.
Males, I'll say males. You're really giving us too much credit if you say 26. But there's a reality here that they are not like Lauren. You referred to them a number of times as boys, and I refer to them as men. And to be perfectly I want to kind of roll back and say no. They don't have fully developed adult brains, and I think boys may be a more accurate word to use.
You're right on the cusp, right? So like you said, legally, they are men, they are boys, they're sort of in between.
Yeah.
And, even though they're at a place where they could, let's say, fund a trip like this themselves and figure out a way to go, and they would be within their right to do that as legally, considered adults. This is also about, I think, again, sort of looking at the adult who's in the room as the parent and saying, hey, I kind of see some things about this that you may not be thinking about and that you may not have considered and that you may not be prepared for. And it's my job as your parent to consider those things for you, to think about those things for you, and to present those things to you.
Yeah. I had an interesting thought, and these conversations that you're suggesting and modeling, they're obviously all the right ones. And then there's this little part of me that as a parent, I'd be like, I wonder if they could even rent the hotel room, because as we're talking about what these boys to men can do.
Yeah.
I know I had to, what they can do often, at least in the US, you can't rent a hotel room until you are 25 or 26 years old. So there may be just a practical limit here. So even if you want to fund this trip on your own, and now we find that you can't, am I the asshole for just sort of dumping it on that and saying, boy, stop it. Like, stop.
Yeah.
But I know the right thing as a parent is to have that deeper conversation. It's hard for parents too, to have those conversations. We're not socialized to have them, and they can feel awkward. So any parent out there listening going, oh my God, I'm supposed to have these really deep sex conversations with my kids. Keep in mind, it's okay that it's hard and awkward for you too.
It's funny because I do work with couples around sexuality in their relationships, and feel very comfortable. Okay, we talk about sex in very clear and frank terms and have these really thoughtful discussions. I'm going to fess up to this. As a parent, talking about sex to my own children, though, like even the adult children, it's like,
yeah.
So like I'll fess up to how incredibly uncomfortable it is, even while like I may have just talked to someone about all sorts of detailed stuff, and I step out of my office with my kids and I'm like, it's really, these are tough conversations to have.
And it's both ways that's uncomfortable. It's like to normalize that, right? Like talking to your parents about sex, knowing that your parents have had, like, it's all kind of icky. I'm a sex therapist, and when my mom or my dad will bring up like a sexual conversation or topic, not that they do that very often, but even just the mention of the fact that they've
I'm out.
They've got, I'm like running the other direction. And my mom was like, is there ever going to be a time where you're not totally icked by the fact that like you have parents who are adults who've had like a life of and I'm like, no.
Right. Or watching something that's highly sexualized or sexually charged, and you're in the theater or in the room with your parents when this scene is playing out. There's just a little like
uncomfortable.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, and like you said, we talk about it. We can be really frank. We can be really descriptive. Like we can have really mature conversations, and yet it's really also very normal for even the most practiced of us to have feelings.
It's normal
about
when it's your own parent, when it's your
life,
own child, and I think that's sort of built into us, right? That those are uncomfortable. There's biological reason for that to be so uncomfortable.
Some universality to that, for sure.
Yeah.
Right. And yet, the more you have open conversations and the more, that dialogue is not something that just happens once or twice, which is what we used to do, right? If you did that at all, it'd be like one talk and that was it.
Right. Referred to as the talk.
The talk.
Right.
The talk.
Give you the talk.
Right. What a huge mistake.
Such an inadequate situation to just bring up the subject very briefly in passing and then never bring it up again, right? And a lot of young people really need that coaching and that mentorship because they don't get it somewhere else. They're not getting it at school, and they're not getting great mentorship from friends and peers, and so they need somebody in their life who's modeling.
Do not learn
how to have these conversations
from another 14-year-old.
Right.
Right.
Let me add one more thing really quick that the internet said that I think you guys might, I'm curious to get your take on it anyway. So most people said not the asshole. The few people who said you're the asshole kind of went down this. I mean, many of them said you promised blah, blah, and then wanted to know like what were the guardrails you put on it and whatever. But the part that I thought was kind of interesting that came out of that was the people who said money aside, assuming that's not an issue, you're preventing them from having an experience and failing. Sometimes you need to let your kids fail, and modern parents don't do that often enough. And I'm just kind of curious, like, if you could imagine where you don't need the money to go to Jamaica and have this experience is fine. Like, that's not the problem. But letting them see whether it lives up to their expectation or not, and then live kind of with the consequences and learn from that.
I think worry. That's a big fail. That could be a permanent life altering kind of fail, as opposed to a situational pick myself up, dust off kind of like, ugh.
I think we want to support children in having developmentally appropriate consequences, right? And not to say that those consequences couldn't be realized in one-on-one scenarios. They could go down to a southern state in the US and be at a hotel. And, similar consequences could be realized in terms of unintended pregnancies or STIs. However, I think the overwhelm of being overstimulated with the number of partners available at a resort like this, the breadth of sexual contact, I think it's possible that that's just not developmentally where they are and ready for. So I think when we want to let children and kids or young adults experience life and fall and get back up, we also want to protect them from, making decisions that they're not ready for, or, having consequences that just don't meet where they are developmentally.
Yeah, where I see this is the difference between, and I do believe it's important to let kids fail. You want to let them fail, but you don't want them to be harmed. And what we're talking about here is a situation where it's not just that they may fail, but they may fail and in some way experience harm themselves or cause harm for others. And so that's where I would just respectfully disagree with the internet. Like, yes, my kids can fail, but I don't want them to be harmed in that failure. We want that failure to occur safely. So I'll disagree with the internet.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, Dan. It's about sort of titrating a dose of failure, giving it to them, but not allowing them to fail spectacularly in ways that they would then be harmed. There are just some things we wouldn't let them do, and other things that you think, well, there are acceptable risks here, and it feels like these are, as a parent, I would think, and as a psychologist, I think these are really big risks that these kids are asking to take.
Yeah, it's not that the adults who go to a resort like hedonism are all being as thoughtful as we're suggesting. It's not like everybody has great conversations around consent and, coercion and harm reduction and all of these things. But again, opportunity to model some of the things that should be considered, right? And when you go in and you don't have any vision for sort of what is your sexual ethic, what are the things that you're going to do to make sure that everybody is safe and protected? You're certainly, maybe not seeing that as much in the adults in the room, let alone, people who are just budding into adulthood.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lauren, for joining us. And thank you, all three of you, for another riveting debate and a glimpse into the collective conscience of the internet forums. Remember, as Lauren said earlier, morality is often shades of gray and not just black or white.
Wow. Yeah, this was a fantastic, really wonderful challenge, Michael. Thank you for bringing this to us. It really got us thinking sort of clinically, but also I think in just very human and parenting kind of ways.
Yeah, please follow and share Veritas Views on any of the podcast platforms with your neighbors and friends. And as always, stick around through the credits for whatever the bonus conversation happens to be about.
You can follow Dr. Dan Kessler at Dr. Dan Kessler and Dr. Gayle MacBride at Dr. G. MacBride. Oh, and you can find them both at veritaspp.com. Credits. Tickling the Ivories, Matthew Reddington. Art, production, and design, bringing this show together with flair and finesse, Michelle Love. Recording and editing, turning chaos into something worth sharing, Michael MacBride. Intro, outro, I'm Kelly Buttrick, a VO talent who just happens to be Dr. MacBride's cousin. Cats, CJ, Linus, Sadie, and Griffin. Hosting by whomever lost the coin flip. Interruptions by all their children. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Listening to this podcast does not constitute a therapist-client relationship. If you believe you may be experiencing a mental health issue, please seek the assistance of a qualified mental health professional. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, you can call or text 988 from anywhere in the U.S. to be connected to Crisis Mental Health Services.
Thanks for listening. As promised, here's that bonus conversation.
All right. Well, Dan suggested we do a throwback question. We had ended our season with some this and that kinds of questions. But Dan, you suggested going back to the beginning.
Yes. Why? So in your office, we have, and again, people aren't necessarily seeing this, but wow, you are just like plants behind you. So everything in our offices usually has, like, we intentionally choose these things either to show something or to part of ourselves, or just to have a nice, pleasant, therapeutic background. Love these plants. Is there a specific reason for them?
Yeah, I have a lot of plants, both in my home office and all throughout my home.
Oh,
And, I think it started off, like you said, Dan, for just like they're just aesthetically appealing, and they're, comforting, and they just provide a nice atmosphere. But I started to realize over time that they also had another meaning, because, tending to plants, watching them grow, making sure that, you're showing them care. When you don't tend to them, they can die. And I started to see some parallels in my, planting abilities, and sort of how humans grow, how relationships grow, what it takes to sort of cultivate and tend to, both, right? And so just watching the little things that can happen, like a new leaf that develops, is like really cool to witness when you start to get into the plant world. And I started to see this parallel about, like, it takes time to see growth inside or interpersonally and relationally. And then when you do, it's just so satisfying to see that new growth, to see that new, whether it's a neural pathway or a behavior or something different. But it also takes time, and it takes intention to create that new leaf, so to speak.
Wonderful.
Damn, she's good.
I know. That's terrific. All right.
Well, thanks again for joining us. Tune in again next week for a whole nother Am I the Asshole debate.
We love hearing from you, so please review us on Apple, Spotify, or, well, wherever you're listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please review, like, and follow. Also, give it a share. This helps us reach more listeners.